Millions of people who fear unemployment take out insurance which will pay their mortgage or loans if they lose their job. But it's now clear that if insurance is paid out personally to the man or woman insured, it can disqualify them from unemployment benefit. The issue's been raised by a Labour MP who was contacted by a constituent who'd had his job seekers allowance withheld.
Clearly there's a problem here. We can't have people who've acted very sensibly being penalised for being prudent and self-reliant.
The Department of Social Security says it's up to banks and building societies to guarantee insurance payments go straight to the lender. Then the payout can't affect benefits. But Europe's biggest insurer of personal loans said tonight that would be a massive task. Government is responsible for the confusion, and government, it believes, must now clear it up.
Now, these consumers have paid in good faith a premium to receive a benefit for risks they are taking, whether that's a mortgage risk or a loan risk. To suddenly be told that this is going to be netted off against your job seeker's allowance is to be told you are paying a premium for no reason at all. And this is a very dangerous precedent for the government to set.
Clearly, anyone who has insured a car loan or any other borrowing would do well to check that if they lose their job, money is paid direct to their credit company. Around 15 million people pay insurance to protect their mortgages or loans. But unless the government or the insurance industry acts swiftly to close this loophole, it appears many of those policies won't be worth the paper they're written on. Peter Morgan, BBC News in the City.
We just heard that the man shot in a sectarian attack in Belfast tonight has died. He was 52 and worked for a taxi firm in the Ormer Road. Violent protests in Zimbabwe have forced the president, Robert Mugabe, to back down over steep increases in the prices of basic consumer goods. Police helicopters fired tear gas and people were clubbed in townships south of the capital, Harare, after rioting spread from the centre of the city this evening. Prices have been rising by as much as 20% following the collapse of the currency. From Harare, our Southern Africa correspondent George Alagaya reports.
It's the second time in as many months that Harare has been gripped by violence. Unlike the previous occasion, today's unrest appears to have been a spontaneous reaction to a weekend announcement of impending price rises, especially for foodstuffs.
We are very angry. We need some money.
We need some money.
Yes, we really need some money.
If you see something today, if you go tomorrow, you see the price change. So everything, we need them to be changed.
Africa's recent history is littered with examples of governments that have underestimated their people's anger when the simple task of getting enough food to feed a family becomes almost impossible. While most people left work and headed back to the townships, a protest in itself, small bands stayed on in the capital where they looted several businesses. Here, one shopkeeper defends what's left of his store. The government's strong-arm tactics have only served to expose its desperation. Nearly 18 years after independence, the ruling ZANU party is less popular than it's ever been. Mr. Mugabe is being blamed for the country's ills.
We are prepared to destroy anything we want. We are prepared to destroy even the president himself. If he comes here in town, I will destroy him here.
The confrontation is not over. After dark, the unrest was reported to have moved to the townships that surround Harare. No one should doubt the significance of this unrest. It's Mr. Mugabe's political authority that's been challenged on the streets of the capital. And the government's decision to re-examine some of the price rises only addresses a part of the problem. George Alagaya, BBC News, Harare.
Gale force winds and blizzards have hit the north of Scotland, cutting off power supplies in some areas and closing dozens of roads. In the most severe conditions of the winter so far, some schools and airports were also forced to close. Tonight, though, conditions are beginning to improve.
Blizzards swept across the north of Scotland, hampering traffic and closing roads in the Highlands and Grampian. It was the force of the wind driving the snow that made conditions particularly difficult. Poor visibility and icy roads resulted in dozens of accidents, and police have been urging drivers in the north and northeast to travel only if their journey's essential. The snowstorms brought down power lines. This morning, 25,000 homes were without electricity. but repair teams in Orkney, the Western Isles and the north of Scotland have worked all day to try to clear the backlog.
Most of our customers on the mainland should be on, and in Orkney as well. They should be on tonight by late this evening. Unfortunately, in the Western Isles, and particularly in Harris, there's still a problem there, and there might be a number of customers off overnight.
Many people had trouble getting to work, and pupils stayed at home from more than 30 schools. For those commuters who braved the weather, the conditions were extremely difficult, although the winds are expected to ease tomorrow. Winter came late to Scotland this year, but across much of the country it's now arrived with a vengeance. After the snow, falling temperatures are expected to create icy roads and hazardous driving conditions overnight. Colin Blaine, BBC News, Perthshire.
One of the pioneers of rock and roll, Car Grand Prix. Neil Bennett reports.
It would take a real stretch of the imagination to see what it has to do with motor racing, but the launch of the new Jordan car said a lot about the scale of the team's ambition. They hired the Albert Hall, a troupe of acrobats, and even by Formula One standards, it was a spectacular prelude to the '98 season. The performance that counts, of course, has to come on the track, and Jordan reckon they now have a car to compete with the best. It's powered by a Mugen Honda engine, and the aim is to secure the first Grand Prix win for Jordan in 7 years of trying. The 1996 world champion, Damon Hill, will surely have a better chance of adding to his 21 wins than he did last season.
I'll be pleased to get to the end of the race, actually. That would be an improvement over last year. But the real goal is to actually win some races. We have to make that, we have to strive for that, and I think that we can do it.
60% of the team's sponsorship money comes from the tobacco industry. In the long term, Formula One is going to have to reduce its dependency, but for the moment, Jordan says it can't do without it.
I think if they withdraw, we'd have to relook at the whole situation, and I think Jordan would have to move out of Europe, which I think would be a disaster for everybody because of the technical knowledge that Britain particularly has. And I think that we would certainly be a lot less competitive.
Jordan have a reputation as the fun team of Formula One. With Hill on board, they now have a proven winner, and the partnership ensures maximum British interest in the '98 season. Damon Hill will also have the chance to show his critics that it's not just the car and the technology which brings success, but the driver as well. Neil Bennett, BBC News.
And now back to our main story.